Hi, I'm Serifatu, a clinician at Onsite. You might be curious about boundaries, or maybe you've already learned about them and you're struggling to set them. Let's talk about what boundaries are, why we need them, and why it can sometimes be hard to set them. Sometimes families have a pattern that makes it difficult or actually impossible to set boundaries. And the word we use to describe that is enmeshment. So what that means is the system is such that it's hard to tell who's who, where one person starts and another one ends. And there's different reasons why this sets up. Sometimes families have a culture that says we are one, we are a unit, and everything that we do has to be for the good of the family. This can begin because of a crisis, maybe, where the family needed to come together, and then that begins to be a set rule in the system, maybe even after they no longer need it. It could be a way that caregivers manage anxiety. So they want to try to keep everything the same to try to bring the anxiety down. And so as we're growing up, we may get messages that we're not allowed to have needs, or we're not allowed to disagree, or that we need to overfunction to take care of different members of the family and disregard our own personal needs. Enmeshment usually comes from a parent's unmet needs. So they may try to get those needs met through their children. Sometimes also parents set up a dynamic where the child is parentified. That means they're given responsibilities that are not appropriate for a child. Maybe they're overly responsible for their siblings, paying bills in the household, different things that are beyond their level of development. It's important to me to be very careful when we're talking about these patterns so that we don't demonize parents or speak disparaging about different cultures. I want to be really sensitive about that, while also acknowledging that boundaries are important. They keep us safe emotionally. And as we're making a shift towards adding more boundaries in our life, the people that we're connected to may experience some discomfort as you're making that transition. And a person may be afraid even to begin setting boundaries because they will be going against the norm in their families and other relationships. How do you know if maybe you need to start setting boundaries? You might notice feelings of resentment, chronic feelings of resentment in your relationships. You might notice a pattern of chronically being overextended or feeling burnt out. Do you ever feel guilty about expressing what you need? You may sometimes feel confused about how you feel versus how the other person feels. It might even be scary to acknowledge or voice how you feel. Those are indications that maybe some boundaries are needed. And as you begin to explore that, that could bring up more feelings about setting boundaries. The thought of setting boundaries may cause you to feel guilty, or maybe an old narrative will come up, an old tape in your mind will come up. Oh, that's selfish. Maybe I shouldn't do that. You may have some anxiety or fear about how the other person is going to receive your boundary. It also could cause you to be afraid that the act of setting your boundary will be perceived as you pushing the other person away, when actuality, you're wanting to set the boundary so that you can stay in relationship with the other person. This makes me think of a quote that I really like from Parentification. They share, "Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously." I think that statement expresses the goal of setting boundaries and learning how to press through the discomfort of setting them to get to the other side, to what we all want, which is connection. A boundary is about your behavior. There's a misconception. People think that if I set a boundary, I'm dictating what someone else's behavior needs to be. That would be a rule. A boundary is letting the other person know where your limits are and informing them how you're going to take care of yourself when you reach your limit. So for example, a rule would be, you can't yell at me. Don't yell at me. A boundary would be, when we're talking, when I start to feel as though the conversation is too heated, I'm going to remove myself so that I can calm down and then return to the conversation. So I'm not dictating what the other person does. I'm informing them what I'm going to do in certain situations. And then that person has a choice. They can choose to not yell or make the conversation get too heated. And I can choose when it's safe for me to be in the conversation and when I need to take a pause. I have a little tool that I use sometimes with clients, and it's called a no learner's permit. And it's a little slip of paper that reminds me that I get to have a no. I get to utilize a no. And some situations require a no. So remember I said earlier about you might need a boundary if you're finding yourself being chronically overextended, burnout, or building up resentment. That might be a good time for a no. So here's an example. Let's say a friend asks you to help them move, and you're aware that you don't have the bandwidth or you have another obligation, and so you're not available to move, to help them move. That might be a good place for a no. Now, you might be tempted not to tell them no, because what if they think you're not a good friend or you're not helpful or whatnot? But your body is screaming, telling you, no, we can't do this. So when we offer a no, we can acknowledge that other person's feelings about our no and still hold on to our no. Breaking patterns of behavior takes practice, and sometimes we need help with that. So I invite you to look in the description of this video, and you'll find a link to a tool that'll help you practice using your no. This tool will provide you with an affirmation to help you remind yourself why you have the right to use your no, and to help you move through the discomfort of beginning to use it more and more. I encourage you to think about the different areas of your life. Maybe start with the area where you feel the most overextended or the most discomfort. And I'd like you to spend a few moments just thinking about why it's important for you to be able to express what your needs and desires are, and also what the benefit you will gain from making your needs and desires known. Sometimes people are initially shocked when we say no or when we set a boundary. And if you haven't been setting them, they could panic a little bit or give you some pushback. I want to invite you to stick with it, because when we can be in relationships that are boundaried, they're safer, we can be more honest, communication will improve, and your personal well-being will improve. So it's worth the initial discomfort to move towards using your boundaries consistently. And let me say this, when you begin to use your boundaries, and if it gets a little messy as people are learning how to adjust, their discomfort and that messiness is not an indication that boundaries are wrong or bad. When we're making changes, sometimes it gets messy. I encourage you to stick with it. You might be one of the first people in your family or friend group who is doing this brave work. You might actually be a transformational character. So as you're beginning to set boundaries, you may have a lot of fear around the discomfort that you observe as the folks that you're connected to are getting used to this new you. I would encourage you to remember you get to have your own needs and wants. It may also be helpful just to acknowledge the other person is having a big feeling. So something like, I can see that you're upset that I've set this boundary with you, or I can see that you're upset that I've said no, and I understand that that's how you feel, and you get to feel that way. And this is my boundary. Does that make sense? Instead of just trying to hope that they don't have a reaction, because here's the bottom line. You get to have your thoughts and feelings, needs and wants, and they get to have their thoughts and feelings, needs and wants. The only person in the dynamic that I'm actually responsible for and have any hope of having any control over is myself. So as you begin to set boundaries, the scenario could go one of two ways. The person that you've set the boundary with may be able to hear you and respond. And so that leads to more connection, honest communication, and you can feel safer in that relationship. Or you may attempt to set a boundary with someone and they don't take it the way you have intended. Maybe they become offended or they become hostile. They may pull away. It's important that we allow people to have their experience. So if that person is unable at that time to meet you where you are and to respect your boundary, there may need to be some distance until such time as that person is ready to try again, listen again. Sometimes the hardest people to set boundaries with are those people that we're closest with. But imagine what's on the other side of moving through the discomfort of beginning to set boundaries with those people. Whenever you learn a new skill, it comes with exploration and practice. And it's helpful to be in a group with others who are exploring and practicing the same behaviors you're trying to practice and learn. And that's one thing I love about Onsite. You get to come and explore and practice with other people who are curious about their relationships and how they can be better. Setting boundaries feels hard at first. So we're going against patterns that we learned long ago. And one thing that I really like about working here at Onsite is I get to walk alongside people as they're daring to begin to change some of those patterns. I would encourage you to look into maybe coming to Onsite to do some exploration of your own. If you're curious about that, click on the link in the description so that you can connect with someone from our admissions department that can tell you more about us and give you an opportunity to answer any questions you might have, just so you can see what's possible. I want to thank you for taking the time to click to learn more about boundaries. I want to encourage you to keep going as you explore this topic and discover how it can change your life and your relationships. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Serifatu, and that was Why Setting Boundaries Feels Impossible.